Alright. Barring any more technical difficulties, let's get this show on the road. Hi guys. I can see the conversation continued long after I left, which is awesome. Sorry I couldn't take part. On top of everything else, the little USB disk I used to move files back and forth, that's supposed to be USB 3.0, has decided to crap out and only act as USB 2.0 with commensurate slow speed. So, yeah, we had a moment. I'm going to work my way through every single part of the chain here, and we're going to watch every single one of them fail. And by the end, I'll have replaced every component, probably, and we'll be good to go. Anyway. Yeah, technology, both the hand that gives and the hand that takes away, right? Alright. So, if you're new to the channel, the spoilers that are allowable at any moment will be marked in whatever the graphic is. I only have the single one right now, the everything forbidden, but they'll change as we go along. What makes my channel a little bit different, there's normal chat rules about not attacking anybody, don't discuss personal anecdotes of politics, religion, sexuality, mental health, but those topics will often come up in stories, especially a story like this one. And so we don't need personal anecdotes to potentially derail the discussion. That's the only way we can really have a constructive conversation about it. So, there are a few automatic bots, as well as my amazing volunteer moderators who are helping keep things clean and everyone behaving. But just be warned that the bots will catch things like the URLs that are not approved, too many caps, too many emojis, too many symbols. You can see the whitelist for URLs in the panel below. I want to warn you too, this is not something I mentioned, I need to write it somewhere. Twitch by themselves will cut off anything you say after about 500 characters, but we discovered, testing this the other day, that it will still look the same to you. You won't know you've been cut off. So just keep that in mind. Try to aim for tweet-sized things when you are trying to discuss. Alright? So. Guy was raiding. Oh, hence the the pirate stuff. I was kind of wondering what's going on. I saw you were on top of it, but I couldn't take the moment to figure it out. Anyway, let's get on to this. So, episode 7 is a standalone episode. It's a self-contained it's kind of like a Monster of the Week format. Not really, except because there's not a monster. Not really. So the purpose here is not to move the plot along. It's not to advance the story. Not really. It's to fill in our understanding of the story we know to this point, the characters we know to this point. It is titled The Works of Man, I think is how Netflix is translating it, and then the English insert title in the middle is A Human Work. And this is one of the instances where religious iconography and phrasing is reaching into the way the story is being presented. There's been a lot of it so far, but it's something I've talked about before, but titles are a very deliberate choice. That's the creator speaking directly to the audience. They are not part of the story itself, so they should always be given special consideration. And the way that manifests itself in this story is the showdown between this jet alone, this giant mecha being activated itself for the first time, versus the Evangelion system, and then the two entities behind each of those initiatives, right? And so, I know I'm skipping ahead here, but I want to talk about the title. We talk about the works of man, meaning things man has made that are man-made, and the aspirations of humankind, however you want to phrase that. The little debate in the center of this and really this whole episode, which is putting the obviously man-made, but with no human inside, something that is pure artifice jet alone, which right in its title says alone, against the much more biological, human, unpredictable, arguably flawed, depending on how you want to look at it. There is a contrast to the whole thing, but by having that title where you say the works of man, it invites us to imagine a contrast between things made by humans and things made by the divine, something clearly not human. It doesn't spell it out for us, but the title and the way this episode goes invites us from the get-go to wonder about that contrast. If a human-made is one thing, what is the other thing? It lets us know that some of what we're dealing with is not human-made. What does that mean? One more thing that it just wants us to wonder. But by putting this title, they want to make sure we don't miss it, right? So, so as we go through this thing, let me get to my clips. This will be the last stream we have to deal with my sloppy clip hunting. So once we have invoked that humans versus maybe the divine, but something clearly not human, we get this image of Gendo at his office with the little kind of tree of life or whatever it is that shows up in the credits. Very distinct pattern. And so I think from the get-go, we are meant to let's see. The title invited us to wonder what could be not human, and then we kind of open on the shot of this, the religious iconography, right? And so we can't ignore doing it beginning like this, doing it so deliberately. We are, as we go along, starting from now, especially, not so much next episode, but definitely from now on, we will not be able to ignore the way the creators are trying to make us think of what is beyond human-made. The scale of this conflict goes beyond humans, maybe even just the humans versus angels. So, but what it does is we have this little shadowy plans, right? We got this other little thing. This actually introduces a character we don't meet till next time, but we meet him on the phone here. And a reference to what I think is going to happen next time. It's not specified, but I'm pretty sure that's what's going on. Now, this episode is structured around three, outside of the very beginning, very end scenes, which address the Kabbalah stuff. It is Kabbalah. You're Kabbalah? Kabbalah? Don't you hate when you've read a word your whole life and then suddenly realize you're not sure how to pronounce it? Anyway, outside of those two conspiracy things, the two things that bookend the episode, this whole episode is structured around three breakfast scenes. All right? And the one in the middle especially plays double duty for us. But I said the other day that the Pimpin, the penguin, I associate strongly with that little happy, upbeat sound. And it's really because of this episode where he and Shinji do the in-sync eating breakfast, and that this is a light everyday slice of life moment motif kicks up. So in this case, what the first breakfast scene does is helps us see Shinji's development and his increased comfort. His increased comfort level with Misato, which, like I said, this episode doesn't matter in terms of plot. It's all about what we get out of the characters and thematic things, and a little bit of world building too. And so this initial bit of advancement in their morning exchange, where he is chastising her for forgetting to make breakfast, when they have their own little exchange, little back and forth. He has this bit where he, oh gosh, man, I'm so gonna love it when I can fetch clips on demand. He makes the, I think I still know why you're still single at your age. Ouch. Shinji, throwing shade. How far you have come. And it's not just for our entertainment, and it's not just to show us, and Misato is, oh gosh. You know, Misato doesn't fail to notice either. The scene ends with her kind of remarking, I believe that's actually the way they decided to translate it, as snark. I think that is actually the term that they decided to use. That she is actually kind of happy, right, about the snark. That she's relieved, I think. That he's able to fire back, that he's able to push back. This shows some personality and comfort between them that has only just slowly started to grow. Started with him actually being able to think of his home, but being able to kind of rib back, that's similar to how she and Rizko were ribbing him about Rei, and the same as Toji and Kensuke. Yeah. Now, that is one step forward, maybe two steps forward, but there's actually kind of a step back in this scene that I just want to point out real quick. She is coming to his school today. That is part of the non-crisis part of this plot, and it's his future plans meeting. Okay, so this is, I think, analogous to like a parent-teacher conference, English. And the fact that she's going, that she is going to be a sub-in, is, again, kind of seems like it's going to emphasize the fact that they are growing more to a parent-child surrogate relationship. And that seems like great progress. And the fact that he's able to snark is fine. But when she makes the mistake of saying that it's all part of the job, then it's less of something she's doing because of their personal connection. And Shinji doesn't fail to notice this either. In fact, she reacts immediately when he responds. She knows. Now, whether this is a case of her saying what she means without meaning to, or her unconscious peeking out, or her just being a little bit sloppy with her language, which is believable, they had a moment to be that much closer, and she accidentally kind of goofed. But still, the fact that she notices that him firing back is progress is at least some kind of progress. So then, of course, we have the guys so very excited to come pick Shinji up from school, the off chance to see Misato. But at this point, she is just a source of embarrassment for him. The way she's dressed, the fact that I think the guys are there for that, man, I don't think he's confused about this. But, like she says, it's a good sign that he's loosened up. Maybe he realizes it's her job, but in this scene here, when he's walking to school and thinking about their morning exchange, he's smiling, you know? So there is actual genuine acceptance of progress. But that also, she immediately calls to make sure that security is following him. So for all of the song and dance of parent-child relationship. Still, she's going to fall back into that business relationship. Anyway, now Misato is not confused at all about what kind of. Uh, Misato is not confused at all. Third time? Misato is not confused at all at what kind of impact her very flashy entrance to the school would have. She rather relishes this, I believe, to show up to be, she's dressed to the nines. She makes a flashy entrance. She gets everyone's attention. There's no question at all that she knows people are going to see this. And she looks up. She's expecting them. She knows as soon as she gets out. She knows they're looking. She does the cool, taking the sunglasses off, and this is what she's expecting. This is very calculated. And we know, since we just saw this morning, this is only an external thing. This is a face she shows to the world. She delights in it, right? Now, whether she's doing this for Shinji's sake or not, does she actually care about the attention she gets from a bunch of adolescent guys? Yeah. Is he upset because of the embarrassing older sister? Or because of the asking him to think about how hot she is and they don't have that kind of relationship? I don't know either. I feel like he was so put off by her initially that it was a similar distancing, but you still can't ignore that. He was embarrassed to be seen naked by her, and she was, more like, you should probably cover that up, not herself reacting to him in that way. But of course, this is another one of those like adolescent typical things where the guys are all gaga over the beautiful older woman, and all the girls are a little bit jealous, a little bit kind of think guys are giant idiots. You can see their displeasure. I skipped over it when we were talking about the episode before, but really one of the key shot compositions in the earlier episode was when Toji and Kensuke were teasing Shinji about watching Rei, looking up the hill and thinking that they're thinking that he is ogling her, when he's really a little bit more innocent than that. But the fact that you have all the guys in that shot looking up at the girls in their one piece, and the girls all kind of gathered in the corner looking down the guys, and their interest level is down there. Now they're weirded out by Toji. I guess he has a little bit of a creep reputation, which is something will follow you around in high school. Despite that, they're still in that corner where they can be seen. There's a clear. There's an obvious interest. There's an obvious interest the boys and girls are having toward each other at this moment. But they're very distinct, right? They're not intermixing, even in this scene. Their interest is piqued, right? That is like a hallmark of early adolescence, especially. Like, wow, suddenly the opposite sex, just the opposite sex really, in this scene, is really very interesting, but also kind of terrifying for the first time ever. So, both intrigued but also distant is all contained in that shot. A little bit of that in this scene as well. And there's just one more thing helping else realize that emphasis on adolescent, the things adolescents go through, the tiny little struggles, are what a lot of this is about on a personal level for the characters. So that's what I'm speaking from experience. I wouldn't have been aware enough to know if I was thought of as a creep, honestly. Um, no, I was one of those people that had a high school sweetheart all the way through. Um, Having to restart the thing over and over again resets my notes too. All right, so I'm gonna clip hunt for a second to get to our next point. But and he's. I mean, I think we could have picked up on this. We didn't actually need to hear Shinji's thoughts for this, but the fact that he is dismissing all of their enthusiasm because he's seeing behind her veil is something I'm pretty sure we could gather. And sorry, it's being especially bad right now. Shinji is both understanding better about her than they do, but not understanding why it's different. And the end of this episode will be a kind of a key point of this. And I like that even the other guys in the backdrop are giving him kind of the looks of disbelief, which I think again suggests that even though we really only get to know these two characters so far, Toji and Kensuke, that Shinji's circle of friends and people paying attention to him has expanded. He actually is kind of fitting in. Trying to skip to, yeah, here we go. So leaving that aside, we learn a little bit more about the experience of piloting the Evangelion when Shinji talks about how it smells like blood. We've seen the LCL, we've seen the thing that immerses them, that they're able to breathe. Being kind of a clear color and holding them in there like that, to me, right away, gave kind of womb-like symbolism, womb-like imagery. And now we find out that they actually smell like blood, that they have a very biological component to them. But, again, going back to my initial impression of it as womb-like, he wonders why he feels so safe in there. And that, to me, reinforces that impression, that this little entry plug for all the other things that assault him. The entry plug feels safe by default. That it should also be where he is when he is put through so much mortal danger and so much psychological stress is a very interesting tension that kind of follows. It's definitely been there from the beginning. It wasn't obvious to us until now that he feels comfortable in there. But setting up the tension between feeling safe and feeling safe and feeling so exposed, and giving it a biological link is. Let's just take note of it, I guess. All right. So let's see. I'm going to lose my notes. We have this. We won't go through the whole bit in the scene. We do have a little bit more world building, where there's the plane ride, and they're talking about having other nations approve the building of further Evangelions, which is the first instance of us knowing that it's a multi-nation effort, that the world is kind of pooling their resources. It was said in kind of an offhand way about that the Geofront is supported by the world, but this is actually more each company or each country approving each one of these decisions individually indicates that NERV is not. They have the work cut out for them at times, I guess. The fact that not all the countries have signed on for this, but they're confident they will, and it helps set us up for the actual Jet Alone showdown and what happens there. Now, during that little conversation, where you get that little bit of world building, we get a really important second piece, where the guy on the plane believes that the purpose of the Ava project is to prevent a repeat of Second Impact. Well, Second Impact that we've been told so far is the meteorite hitting Antarctica. Now Shinji and us will learn the truth. That is a giant cover story. And the truth has a tendency to be covered up. Oh, got it on one try. Now, Ritsuko is the one telling us the story. But Misato's discomfort is really obvious. And she doesn't say a word through the whole thing. But she at least confirms for us and lets us know that 15-year coincidence that was set up earlier, that I talked about at the time, like that seems like a big coincidence, is now confirmed for us that Second Impact was an incident with the Angels, not a meteorite. So that is just another peek behind the fact that the truth is between many layers. Everyone has their own interpretation of the truth according to their goals. And even in this conversation, there's a huge explosion of unknown cause. Are we supposed to believe that it's actually unknown, or is this one more instance of Ritsuko self-censoring when she's talking even to Misato, even to Shinji? Yes, Misato is absolutely troubled. There's no question. They zoom in on her. They make sure you can't miss that she doesn't like something about this story. Anyway, that gives us kind of that world-building little interlude there. Then we get to the second breakfast scene. That's the other thing that helps segment out this story. It's what the structure is built around. The second breakfast scene starts the same way, same ritual, toast popping to the meeting, but it's a very key difference. Doors open up, and it is not Misato dragging herself out of bed in her pajamas, but game-face Misato. And even Pen is shocked at the contrast. And so that first scene set us up to understand what a departure this is, and how seriously whatever's happening today is being taken by her. She's all business and sets out. And so now we are anticipating that very dire things or very important things are at stake in whatever it is that's happening today, the thing that was alluded to by Ritsuko. She's going to Old Tokyo. Get a little bit of that world building. We finally get to see a little more of zones. Derelict Zone number 28. We have so many derelict zones, you have to just number them. That is a nice little bit of detail. And when they actually roll up to this conference, there is a lot of rapid visual storytelling to help set things up for us. So, as they roll in, actually, I'll skip ahead here. As we show into this little jet alone thing, we have this huge variety of helicopter designs, right? And intentionally they show us from two angles to indicate to us that a diversity of interests are in attendance. These are not all from a single country, single corporation, single force. This is a conglomerate meeting. And that's important because the next thing that visually sets up for us is how it's just Misato and Ritsuko at this huge table. Obviously a table meant to accommodate many people with plenty of sake, I'm assuming, to go around. And so they obviously are the fish out of water in this situation. And it's going to pull back here, I'm pretty sure, to show probably the next shot. Yes. Not only are they surrounded in the center, the big buffer around them, clearly every other little entourage is well attended. Lots of representatives there diversity of colors of suits, a couple of design differences, just emphasizing the diversity of people who are here. And then there is our two girls standing completely out. You know, there is this. They are obviously distinct. They're obviously separate. I think most of the people aren't even facing towards them, have their back to them, turned around talking to the different tables and such. Clearly, they are the outsiders and isolated. But at the same time, the fact that Nerve only sent 2 people might feel like a snub also, right? Like, not sending their own giant contingent of people. This is obviously a hostility that might run both ways. Now, even though, yeah, and you might be right, this might actually be a public shunning rather than something they all feel. But our dude takes the opportunity to really grandstand. And I alluded to this when we talked about the title, but to be fair, it is Briscoe who picks this fight. But what the two of them are actually doing, and they actually go back here and forth here, they are meant to show the conflict between Nerve and the whole rest of the world. But one of the things that we learned, that we accomplished through this, is we get some justification for the Evangelions being the way they are. She debates the merits of having an internal reactor, that's not safe for close combat, and they counter that it is inhumane to put pilots through what they put their Evangelion pilots through. And Nerve comes down the side of humanity, basically nature, as far as the combination of science and human, I think is what he says. Whereas these other conglomerates are on the side of automation, artifice, this kind of autonomy apart from human. And so this conversation is not and about control, risk-reward, both in the way these things are powered, but what happens when you lose control? What happens when you think? A big thing he's trying to stump for in this is that the inherent risks of the Evangelion that have been kept under wraps. He even points out that why are they not even telling us why these things? Is all him trying to build up the safety, the lack of risk of this jet alone system, right? And the guy's doing his job, right? And she picked the fight, to be sure. But what I think, on top of everything, this is also... it also might be a little bit of a meta debate between Evangelion and the way they do mecha versus a lot of other mecha shows. But, like I said when we talked about the title, this conversation too seems to be about the advantages and disadvantages of things which are human involved, made, and rely on human decision-making as a important component. The risk of that versus something attempted to be made perfect, right? Something extra human, maybe? I think both the title and this little debate is meant to put that tension in our mind. Like, it really wants us to, and that's almost the point of this whole, not the point of this whole episode, but it's an obvious focus. And to take a whole episode to do that means that we need to remember that is probably going to be a thematic tension we can get used to. Let's see here. There's a little bit also in there of new guard versus old guard, which we'll see more of that next episode. And a little bit of male versus female in this position of power. I mean, he reaches for the caricature of the hysterical woman and draws a parallel between that and the Berserk Evangelion. And the fact that Nerve only sent the 2 the two commanders, who are themselves both women, is apparently, based on the number of suits compared to dresses in that wide shot, is kind of also an upsetting of old guard versus new guard. Old world, new world. So I think that tension is in this as well. And of course, it makes us not sympathetic to the guy. Now, we'll skip around here. Let's to build on that same point. Regardless of why the jet alone thing fails, while the experiment did not work out, was not as safe, could fail, we do get an example of the effectiveness of Nerve once again. Not just in what Misato does to try to combat it, but in the fact that when they need to make that pat decision, when she needs the override code, when she needs that password to try to stop what looks like it's going to be a huge disaster, the guy gets the runaround from bureaucracy. So many people are involved in decision-making, and no one wants to be the one responsible for making that call. So we were actually given a very good justification for why Nerve having wide unilateral powers in emergency situations makes sense. Because, if it had actually been out of control, all that running around could have ended up with another disaster, instead of just letting them immediately get to the task at hand. Misato once again shows that she is equal to that task. Very much like very similar to the sniping, planning, and all that. She quickly comes up with a series of plans, gets all the right people activated. The only thing she's held up for is waiting for that guy to give her the password. Now, that guy wins back some of our affection by giving her the password anyway, when he doesn't get that, which shows that he's not just, despite being set up to be this guy and this antagonistic thing, that he is still human himself. So anyway, I feel like this little debate between them and how it pans out was probably the key exchange of ideas in this episode. And we get another example of the Misato front, right? She actually has multiple fronts. There's the front we saw earlier, where she is all dolled up and dressed to the nines and kind of showing off her femininity and attention-seeking and how cool she can be, versus the one when the day 2 breakfast scenes, when she is all game face. And even this scene, Ritsuko is becoming the center of ridicule for this whole room, and the guy putting all his attention on her. Misato is kind of telling her to disengage. She's actually acting like she is bored by it, pulled out. But when they actually cut to, bored face, when it's actually over and they're in privacy, she is frustrated. She takes it out. That facade comes down, and we get to see the emotional Misato. So it's interesting, and while Ritsuko was the one kind of being confrontational out there in the room, now she's actually willing to throw shade. Now she's actually willing. So she's much more willing to be this kind of person. This is another one of these great shots that gives her a little bit of a diabolical look with the uplighting while she talks about how pathetic he is. It gives her a little bit of a villainous cast, doesn't it? Now, I think that's actually a nice little bit of foreshadowing, because once things start to fall apart, once the jet alone thing doesn't go, Ritsuko's behavior indicates that she knows that's a setup, that she knows that she knows how it's going to turn out, that she knows it's not going to go well, that she knows it's going to betray faith in this little jet alone project. And the guy himself does himself no favors. There's like one of those jinxing the whole thing because he tells everyone to stand on the platform and watch it because it's perfectly safe, which is just asking for it. I guess right here. There's absolutely no danger. Yeah. You were just tempting the universe, man. And Risco knows very well it's what's going to happen. So I think that's kind of the villainous thing while she's burning the plans. I think we're meant to interpret her as being a little bit diabolical. You see how self-satisfied she is watching this activation, and she knows what's coming. Why that's significant to her character is once Misato, who obviously doesn't know the plan, jumps into action, does all these pulling of strings and putting their assets at risk, putting herself at risk. She doesn't stop her. She doesn't pull her aside and say, by the way, it's going to work out. And yeah, she's staying aside. She's not at the window. She's out of the path of the thing. The plan was it just to fail, yeah. Misato getting involved was Misato, being a problem solver, being, thinks fast on her feet, but very, little gung-ho, right? Rush in, volunteers herself to be the one that goes in there. I mean, I'm sure there are people who are capable of inputting a code that are less high priority than her, right? It was her plan, and she wanted to get into the action. But I just think it's really, we should take note of the fact that Risco didn't stop her, didn't pull her aside and say it's going to be okay. Lets her put herself in risk, not the risk of actual meltdown. She knows it's not going to happen. But there's definitely a risk to kind of running out there and trying to get on that thing and going into the very hot room. And I don't even know if there's actual radiation in there or not. But yes, the irony, of course, is that when... Yes, no, I agree. The way it... I know we're skipping ahead, but this one's... the plot's really straightforward on this one. I totally agree that whoever altered the program intended it to shut down at the end. Though Misato didn't have to be there at all. And the purpose of her being there is now we know that. But it also shows that she is not in the inner circle of these kinds of decisions, despite having operational authority over the Evangelions in the field. Which is a very odd separation of knowledge and power, right? Yeah, I don't think it had anything to do with saving Misato. It definitely shows, like you were saying, that Ritsuko, this is where Ritsuko's loyalty line is, right? Keeping this plan a secret, even putting Misato at risk. Because I'm pretty sure that it was never going to go bad. If Shinji hadn't come in, if she hadn't hatched this plan, if she just watched it happen like Ritsuko apparently planned to, it would have looked like it went terribly and then not be disaster at the end, but the faith in the Jet Alone program would be shattered, which means that's what NERV's actual goal was. Now, figure out what that means as far as NERV goes, that they need this autonomy, that they wanted to disrupt this coalition that is obviously a little bit hostile toward them. All these things make sense. But there is a little bit in his in that little locker room where Misato is venting her frustration, where she's upset that they know what an AT field even is. Which means that's a secret they were keeping to their chest. Rather than getting all of humanity and every resource and every mind possible working on solving the problem, even Misato is a little upset that has leaked out. And so I think having a high degree of autonomy and being able to preserve these secrets and cut everyone else out is something we could have suspected about NERV before this episode, and maybe thought it was just Gendo or whatever. But I think there was enough people involved here that it's clear NERV needs autonomy, wide latitude in making decisions with no oversight, that they would go to this trouble, that they would go to this length. And so it's a very cool. I mean, I really like the. Sorry, it's just really clever. The way the guy relents and gives her the password, and the password is hope, which is how. I think it's actually earlier in this episode too, where Kinsuke or Toji, one of them refers to the Evangelions as something that can bring peace on Earth, right? Yeah, it's right before Shinji's sitting in the entry plug and thinking about it smelling blood. That the Jet Alone guys are thinking the same thing. That choice of hope, of such a positive word to be the password, at kind of the heart of this plan. And so, when whatever it was that Nerve did to it, to allow it to go out of control, but not all the way out of control, the fact that that means that hope doesn't work should not be overlooked, right? So that the choice of that password does double duty here. And as cheesy it might have seemed that it's hope, like this lofty thing, it's actually a little bit more clever than that. Yes, hope fails. It's bad security, agreed. And that is it also represents how the Jet Alone is an ideal that they were aspiring for, trying to eliminate all the things that he outlined in the speech, get rid of the trauma on the pilots, being able to operate for so many days without having the limitations that the Avas have, not going berserk, being predictable. There's this hope in an ideal, a perfect being, a perfect creation to serve the needs they need here, and it is. Sorry, the music's a little hot. I want to bring it down. And the fact that ideal of hope fails is, I think, pretty deliberate. And it had nothing to do, though, with Misato and Shinji and their efforts, right? They're not the ones causing hope to fail. It is Nerves behind the scene, the machinations. Anyway, that was a cool double use of that term. Yeah, y'all making great points. That there might even actually be some advantage to how little Misato knows. That she has operational level control, needs to be able to make snap decisions, and in some ways, knowledge can be paralyzing, right? Only knowing a few things you can act on, a few things you can control, narrows your possibility and makes it easier to make a snap decision. So there's actually some strategic value in having Misato not know every single thing at stake all the time. Yeah. Anyway. Once this is complete, once this little crisis is over, like I said, we're going to skip around and not really go through it because it's pretty straightforward. It appears to be one thing, and it's not. It's a manufactured crisis, and it puts in our mind the possibility that Nerve is not above raising manufactured crises, right? So, let's see if I can find. Gosh, there were a couple of great shots in here too. There's the is this the one of the Ava taking off that shows the sense of scale? No, it might be. Anyway, sorry, I was hoping I could find it real quickly. But at the very end, the third breakfast scene. The third breakfast scene. Oh yeah, and sorry, and Misato actually referring to it as it was a miracle, but a miracle that somebody arranged, or whatever, however it is she phrases it. I gotta stop pacing around. Miracle really did happen. Yeah, this little miracle was arranged by someone. Which again, maybe we take that expression, that phrasing, and think of that as not the actual instance of an individual or two in this instance, but something that Nerve itself embodies, that idea, arranging a miracle. Now that now that we know they're not above a little false flag. Not really a false flag, but you know what I mean. Manufactured crisis. Anyway, we got a little bit of the thing that confirms there was a conspiracy for us, saying that Ritsuko is in on it, and Gendo as well. So then we have the final breakfast scene. The final breakfast scene is actually important because their routine's the same, Pen and Shinji, and Misato also goes back to the first breakfast scene. So that second breakfast scene not only helped us understand that this was outside her normal sense of responsibility, going and being the face of Nerve, putting on the other mask. That's also not a character progression. She goes back to how she was, right? Now, this really irritates Shinji, and way more than normal. He's obviously very mad, and it's obvious to his friends when he shows up. But he's mad enough because of this third breakfast scene to throw Misato under the bus. That she's sloppy, she dresses like a bum, that she's a slob. And once again, our two little classmates help spell it out for him. They're actually even more jealous. That they understand that this means that she lowers her mask around him. That he gets to know the real her. And then the key phrase that he says, that means that you're like family, right? And that changes Shinji's whole take on everything. He's obviously immediately delighted. And that might be like having someone point out to him, that's what it's like when you're in family. But giving him an idea if that's what family could be. Not the slovenliness, not her irresponsibility, but the fact that she doesn't have to put the mask up for him. Then maybe that might be what family is. And obviously, that's not what he has with Gendo. And don't know anything about his relationship to his mother at this point. No idea. But no siblings, and obviously no context for what family should mean. So needing them to spell this out for him, and then him having this epiphany, and he likes it, right? So that's all set up by that third breakfast scene, which we know is the pattern because of the first one, and the contrast with the middle one. It's just a great little way to show us that some things don't change, and that's actually the key takeaway. So, I think that's all I actually had to say that I really want to talk about this episode. Did I miss anything? I wasn't paying attention to the chat for the end there, but yeah, he never drinks the tea, does he? Yeah, I mean, that's another thing too, that Misato's not only in the loop, and there has some advantages to that, but since she's the one that we've seen show empathy to Shinji almost from the word go, not pure, she definitely still knows her job, she definitely still obeys her command, goes after her goals. Maybe there is a chance that she wouldn't be down with this, potentially risking others just to sabotage someone who wants to compete for the role of savior of humanity, right? Like, maybe she doesn't care who saves humanity because she's not party to whatever is going on in the shadows. So maybe this is not just about keeping the secret safe, but about cutting out the people who wouldn't go along with certain decisions, right? Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, I actually totally missed the thing about the giant number of terabytes. That would be nice. I can't tell you how much data I generate doing videos and stuff. Um, That's actually a good point. Him being annoyed at her not taking herself feels like it might be linked to how he was afraid for her safety the day before. I skipped past it, but when he finds out she's fine in there, he's so obviously relieved. And I think maybe upset at her for putting herself in so much risk. And so when she goes back to what seems like poor self-care, I imagine that can irritate him as well. Yeah. Um, yeah. It was a pretty straightforward episode. The plot events don't matter, really. But the key of Shinji getting a taste of what family really is and actually internalizing and understanding that, plus showing us what NERV is capable of, and in a shadowy kind of way, right after we saw what they were capable of in a combat stress way, is a nice contrast. That's again, they understand tensions in this story. If nothing else, they really have a good eye for that. So, yeah, this is a great self-contained episode. And so is the next episode is not self-contained because of what happens on there, but it's also another episode where all of the stakes are introduced and met and make important changes to our understanding of people inside the episode. And the episode itself, its intra-plot structure is really solid. It was for this one, it is for the next episode also. Yeah, you're right. It is kind of a breather episode compared to the stakes of other things. You wouldn't think Runaway Nuclear Power Plant would be a feel-good episode, but in this universe that counts. But especially getting to peek behind and see what the day-to-day life of Shinji has become a bit, the normalcy he's carved out for himself. No one sits down and harps on it, but just the little things like him being able to be snarky, her realizing that's important, him being teased again at school, but not retracting from it, is all just, yeah, it's wholesome. That's a good way to put it. So it's a nice little breather compared to the stakes of other episodes. So we did pretty good on time there, despite starting late. So I'm taking 3-minute breaks. There's a couple things I had to change between each stream, which is part of the problem. So I'll see you back in just a minute here. As soon as I find my button, I gotta put this on the deck. See you in 3 minutes, or in theta time. That's apparently like 6 or 7 minutes, but we'll try to make it closer to 3. Alright, guys. Let's just go ahead and get it out of your system. Yep, go ahead. Let's get it. Just be careful with the bottle grab. Oh, too late. Sorry. Thank you. Good to be back. Yep, there it is. Alright, so we have... Our Asuka has arrived. We have finally arrived at Asuka. I've got a little... How did I know this was... Alright, I got a couple of donations here. It should play on screen. Yeah, there you go. Laplace Side L, again. Thank you, sir. Madam. I use guys, by the way, in a very gender-neutral way, so please no one get offended. Thank you for the analysis in the first session today and the first half of the second session. You're welcome. It's actually my pleasure, really. I'm glad you're more comfortable presenting to the live streams today, despite our foibles. I look forward to hearing your analysis of a certain fiery redhead. Yes, I decided to include that bit in the tweet announcing the second stream. Asuka appears and the donations roll in. Coincidence? Well, you read this next alert and you tell me. Yes. This is yeah, sorry, lost the sound again. Yeah. I know Asuka inspires some strong emotions in people, so not just Shinji and everyone else. That's the audience has skin in this game as well, and I kind of anticipated we might as well take a moment and relax my rules about hating on characters. This is something we talked about in the all spoilers discussion yesterday, but I think it's still safe if this is as far as you've seen. We talked about what a key moment it is for Asuka to show up in the story, and we make that judgment from our experience of watching the whole show. But this episode, all by itself, if you knew nothing else, tells you that this is important. This character is important. This is showing up. This is not just adding one more person to the roster. That in the way it ends with her transferring into the school and it being obvious that she'll be an ongoing thorn in the boy's side tells us in the audience that this is not a one-and-done character or just putting a name to a face. This is someone coming. In the last episode, it was actually set up. The guys on the plane were talking about how the second child is coming from Germany. So it was, we knew it would be important when we showed it again. Again, this is a situation where they name something that will therefore be important later because it was set up. But she gets this entire episode is really, it's another one of those things where very little advances the plot, right? A little bit because she's now in the story, but the actual events of this episode don't change anything except the fact that she is here. Instead, she gets a whole episode of focus for us to learn her as rapidly as we can. And only Shinji to this point and a little bit of Misato have gotten that kind of all-episode character focus. So even if this was as far as you've gotten, it should be obvious that, player 3 has entered the game. Now, this episode kind of has a little bit of everything, right? There's lots of great composition. I mean, it's common for a lot of episodes, but this one especially. It's got great action. It has the sense of scale again when she jumps around the battleships and the aircraft carriers. You get the mixing of the old and new, the old guard, new guard, something I alluded to last time. That actually gets personified in this one by the Nerve personnel all being very young and the Admiral being old. They're older tech, they're even pre-Second Impact tech compared to the Evangelions and this newfangled thing that people don't understand, but then is clearly effective, that the new ways are better than the old traditional ways, which itself has a little bit of a thematic thread through the story so far. This new world, the Geofront, Tokyo 3, and then seeing old Tokyo last time, that's a, desolate section 28 or whatever. But we get a lot of humor. We get some more awkward adolescent moments, and there is the little bit of intrigue and the little bit of conspiracy that we don't understand, and a little bit of kind of alien horror uncomfort at the very end. This episode has almost everything in the show that both either tracks or repels people. And I know that for a lot of people who are on the fence about the series, to this point, this episode pushes them one way or the other. Either they are, I'm all in, this is great, or this is too much of whatever it is that you don't like about it. Whether it's the angst, whether it's I don't care. You do you. But this is definitely, if you're not on board with the show after this episode, it's questionable if you ever will be, right? I mean, it's a pretty critical episode, not just where it comes in the story. It's kind of hard to believe that it takes this long before she shows up, something else we talked about, but critical to, this is almost this series as best. Bold statement, I realize. I'm not saying this is the best episode, but as far as bringing everything in the series that people like about it, that is strong, this episode has a little bit of all of it. So, I think for redheads, yeah. It is, I will say, is kind of interesting. Might as well point this out now. The last episode and this episode that are so not big plot stories. This one's a little more than last time. Last time you can excise and it doesn't make a difference to the story. Both of these episodes where we really get to see characters act like people and flawed and many interactions, not just two people conversations. Rey is absent completely from both episodes, I think. I don't think she even gets a cameo. Do you hear approaching Yvonne in the background? I don't know. It's over here and I can't read it. Sorry. Anyway. Even without the people who are big fans of Asuka, this, I think, is a episode that shows off what the show does well. So, let's get into it. There's an interesting gesture right out of the gate, where they're going to pick up Asuka, and Misato is going as well. And she brings Shinji, which is, but not Rey. Again, I'm going to point that out. They bring her along his friends. Well, they're not nerve personnel at all. I mean, this is like a field trip. And, she jokes about them going to a luxury liner, but like, oh, you're right. I'm sorry. Rey does make a cameo in the classroom to show that even as the boys and girls are distinct, she is still further distinct from the girl. But, from the girls. But Rey's not here. She didn't go to meet the second child. Kensuke and Toji are? This seems like an unusual relaxation of the rules, and so I can't help but think that this is not a normal way this has gone about, that Misato herself had to campaign for this to bring Shinji's friends along. Which I think, again, despite the complications it could have caused, tells us about Misato all over again. It doesn't happen on screen, so this is just me speculating, but I feel like there was probably a little bit of pulling rank to do this in the same way she did so to make them roommates. Right? Yeah, anything to keep Shinji stable. Anything to thing. Oh, that's a good point. They have kind of broken, by being in the Evangelion, it's kind of not a top secret to them anymore. I guess it's good that Nerve doesn't lock up kids in the black site somewhere, right? Silver lining to the child soldier factory. But what is perhaps the more important purpose is that they make a great set of foils for the introduction of Asuka by having different personalities, by being a bunch of adolescent boys instead of just awkward Shinji. Her particular brand of femininity and confrontational and aggressive personality has a bigger stage, right? She has more people to build off of and throw it against. At the same time, this is like Kinsuke going to Disneyland. I mean, look at the guy. This is the best day of his life up until, you know, so he has to pay admission to the viewing. And so it helps us also appreciate the old tech, having him along to go all gaga at everything and remark on the waste of the planes that are knocked into the into the ocean or otherwise destroyed. And oh yeah, sorry, Flying Simeon has donated to the cause of no more wife wars. So let us respect that now that we're underway. Hopefully you got it out of your system. Thank you. I do have a question. Sorry, minor diversion. There's an instance in here when Asuka gets in the cockpit, and at first she is doing the activation sequence in German. I know we've got some German speakers in the chat. How is her German? How is her? I'm so used to preparing to cringe when a Japanese voice actor or actress is about to do a little English. Terrible German. Okay. Yeah, okay. I mean, I figure just because it doesn't sound like her accent really changes that much. But, terrifying emphasis. Yeah, it seems very reading off a script. But, yeah, but, it's like... I mean, I kind of figured it would be the same. But, isn't it funny? I just feel like it would be really easy to find someone who could just do... I mean, I know for dubbing, but, like, every once in a while you'll have just throwaway characters in an anime who speak... English is the most common, and German's probably the second most common, come think of it. Surely someone would volunteer to be that throwaway character that could just nail the accent, right? Yo Theta, try some German. I didn't challenge myself to anything. It's right there in the rules. I am strictly monolingual, just for everyone's collective cringe. Yeah, I know German and English have a lot of crossover. Even though we talk about English as being kind of a romance language, and a lot of its vocabulary is romantic in origin, thanks to invasion by Romans and later invasion by Normans, most of the common words, the most 600 or so spoken words, are Germanic in origin. And so sometimes if I'm not paying attention to a German speaker, it kind of sounds like they're just speaking English in a thick accent. But yeah. Japanese, totally different. It has so little in common with English, it's almost comical. So I guess I'm glad that they are consistent with this. Anyway. Sorry for the diversion there. It was just something I was curious about. So I'm like, gosh, I know I've got to know about German speakers. They definitely have a better idea than me. So let's get back to those. So one of the things I talked about a minute ago was, sorry, I forgot about Goofy Toji's attempt at being smooth. The fact that he bought it on chance of a date, and then it becomes the thing that is Asuka's very first action to stomp on the hat is, I mean, wow. Okay. Could you characterize what their relationship will be any faster than that? There is one of the many great shots in this is our actual first shot of Asuka, which I think is before this, after this. Sorry. Tomorrow this will be solved. Come hell or high water. We're not going to watch me stumble around for clips. There it is. Her watching it, and then this kind of looming backlit, she's still mysterious. They don't want to give away what she looks like really until all the characters are doing it, because they want the audience to be in sync with the audience for once more. But it's a nice little bit of foreshadowing. The billowing wind also leads us to expect the later kind of upskirt reveal there. So yeah, it's just a nice little. They really kind of they're really good at that kind of thing throughout the whole series. But whatever else you feel about the series, I feel like it'd be hard to argue they do a bad job with that. So my man is geeking out here, and then yes, very first action, very first things that we see her do. She immediately greets Misato. She's also on first name basis. Tells us they have a past. Tells us this is, there's some familiarity here. And Misato's doing you've grown since the last time we've seen. But she actually decides to turn it about and make it about her maturity that she's filling out in all the right places. The part of the way she is characterized, part of the rapid characterization for Asuka, that you just can't help but get this overwhelming first impression of her, is her her emphasis on her own femininity, on her own sexuality. We see how windy it is. We should know clearly how impractical it is to be in a sundress, right? And there's no way she doesn't know this. But she is intending to make a first impression here. She's been waiting to see the so-called third child, and this is what she chooses to do. And she's similar to Misato, at least in this respect. That part of the way she wants to present herself is in this, that her femininity is an important part of her identity from the word go, right? Even the way the way the camera is looking at her, we're not looking at her eye level, right? She's looking down at us again. Hands on hips, very confident and assured of her place in the world, and that place is above them. So, and then Toji gives us a little taste of why. Sorry, I forgot how amazing her expression is. And Toji gives us a little taste of why the girls might, not like the fact. Sorry, I just had to see it again. Why the girls have this opinion of Toji? All right, like, I think even Shinji knows this might be a little beyond the kid. So, anyway, the fact that she's willing to slap all of them out of the gate. That she isn't embarrassed at the fact that they saw her, but more wants to use that as an excuse to be physical towards them. To me, it says that her femininity and her sexuality is not just like part of her identity in how she thinks of herself, but she also uses that and considers it a thing that gives her power. Okay, gives her the right to act that way. And also, important thing about her identity out of the gate is the interface things they wear, on their head. That I think really they only need to actually pilot. She makes that a regular part of her attire. All right, that's also part of her identity. So even though it doesn't really go with her outfit, that is perhaps even more important part of her identity than her presentation, right? Like her physicality. Okay. She almost never takes them off. I don't think she doesn't in this episode at all. And then once she is kind of sweet about trying to figure out who. Okay. Sorry. She she doesn't let this derail her about finding out about this third child. And I think in this shot, you can see that her actual interest, her actual curiosity, and and the fear that it might be the guy she just saw too much of. But once she's actually introduced to Shinji, she's immediately in competitive mode. She immediately disparages him. She immediately feels maybe threatened by him. It's hard to say if she's competitive for us at this point. It's hard to say if she's competitive for the sake of being competitive, or if it says something more about her or insecurities. And she's heard things about him, doesn't think much about him out of the gate, but I think part of me wonders if this would have been her reaction no matter what he looked like or how he presented, that she was ready to pick a fight from the word go, right? And so, anyway, I don't know how long that scene is. It's not very long. I can actually measure it. From the moment she steps on the hat to the end is it's not even a minute long. That's not even a minute, all that. And yeah, we got a pretty good sense of Asuka, or at least the Asuka she presents to others in very short order. And that helps us get ready for everything else that happens in this episode as we continue to meet more about her. We talked about the conflict between Nerve and the old guard and new guard earlier. I will point out as well that I feel like isn't Asuka taking a little bit of pride in this argument, that she feels important to have this whole fleet for her. I mean, that little Misato's looking distressed about this, but Asuka's pretty pleased that the dude is not just relinquishing fire control. Yeah, I mean that is peak smug. And so I think we can derive pretty quickly about Asuka that feeling of prestige, of being important, is key to her character, which helps inform her actions in the later half of this episode. That when she decides to activate Unit 2 without orders, with Shinji in the cockpit, it's not so much about saving the day. I mean, she's excited to see the angel. The fact that she didn't know it was an angel without Shinji's help tells us that for all her bravado and her competence, she actually performs pretty well. She doesn't have a leg up on him in every way, which might be, causing this insecurity, if that's what it is, causing this need to push at him. And but more importantly, I think activating Unit 2 and going to save the day is about that prestige, that not just piling in an Ava, but being the best and performing and succeeding the day all makes her feel important, just the same as having this giant, the entire Pacific Fleet out there just for her and her Ava, right? So, Breacher, good point. Yeah, retracting blinds. Another, again, I really... You really could go all the way through Evangelion and generate a considerable amount of content doing nothing but looking at the choices of how they compose these scenes. Where reacting blinds is... It kind of seems to come in waves, doesn't it? Retracting blinds, is saying that, yeah, it's because I said it wrong twice. That side characters don't get in focus as much. Now, this is definitely it can be an efficiency thing in animation to not worry about these side characters. But if you look at these two guys right here, they're pretty detailed, right? They have different facial shapes. not dramatically so. The chins are different skin tone, color, outfits are slightly different. They got some details on there, and yet their eyes are obscured. They are pushed as they are clearly background characters. It's one of the many reasons that you should pick up immediately that Asuka is going to be a huge addition to the story, because she doesn't get this treatment. Even Toji and Kensuke get this treatment a lot. There'll be a lot of shots in this scene, in this episode, where you know everyone's there, but they're not in the shot, right? And so, yeah. Anyway, sorry. It was a good comment, and a good point. I wanted to come to it. Now then, Player 4 has entered the game. We talked about how very similar Shinji and Misato are in some ways. And even though they're so different in personality. And so if we're going to introduce a character that is a inciting foil to Shinji, then why not introduce one for Misato at the same time? Now, Kaji is throughout this whole episode, the dude never quite loses his self-satisfied, self-assured front. The only time he's not that was when he's in secret communication. He's very amused by this. He's enjoying every part of this, twisting Misato. And I'm pretty sure, like, dude's playing footsie with her, right? Like, I'm not imagining that. That's not just poor animation, right? And so, the facial expressions in this scene just say it all, right? Like, do you need to know what's going on to know the relationship between these characters, right? At this moment, anyway. I'm pretty sure the dude's like trying, and she eventually will uncross and pull away, but he immediately characterizes himself by going to the personal level of Misato. Immediately asks her if she's seeing anyone, and when she's kind of rebuffing him, he decides to ask not a question he needs the answer to. He's a question that he wants them to know that he knows that she used to toss and turn in her sleep, right? He wants to discomfort her by making sure it's clear that he is not just like some kind of dude coming on to her with no aggressively without reading the room. Rather, they have a history, and it's that kind of history. And it's interesting that he wants that to be his first impression for a lot of these people. It's actually kind of funny that, tell you, love and hate are two sides of the same coin. You know, two people who were intimate at one point and on bad terms will hate each other way more than two people who just kind of drifted apart. But when he actually asks that inappropriate question, the only person who doesn't seem to react to that is Shinji. Shinji, I don't think Shinji gets it. And it's he's the fun uncle. That's the good way to put it. At least that is how he's presenting himself. Hang on, I'm getting a little crackle in my voice again. I like the improvement in not losing the sync between things and being able to cut out all the backgrounds and not have the music fade in and out, but this is kind of annoying. Shinji cares more about, hey, how did you know my name? Like, Shinji, man. I mean, luckily, Kaji's polite about it, but like, dude, he works for Nerve, obviously. How would he not know your name? Why is this a mystery? Sorry, Asuka's so shocked. Now, leaving the main focus here is Asuka, but when he starts talking about the fact that Shinji is famous in their world, and whatever it is he says exactly. Yeah, look at Asuka. This is the thing that actually breaks her out of the shock. Look at that look. Like, boy, she could draw blood with that. And again, I think this is taking the spotlight off of her. But she knew Misato, but seems shocked at the reveal that they used to be lovers, right? We don't know enough to gather too much from that, but I think there is obvious jealousy at Shinji's fame from her here. But you also have to wonder if it's the fact that Kaji's heaping all this praise that makes it that much worse for her. Right, and again, the shooting the daggers. And you know, Shinji tries to play it off, shows how opposite he is to Asuka in this situation, and putting only the two of them in the shot with these two different expressions, it's hard to miss. Let's see. I do want to point out that I lost it. Well, anyway, probably she was going to do this anyway, but definitely prompted by that conversation. Asuka and the conversation that she has with Kaji immediately afterwards, which I am hunting for, but might be missing. Isn't it? Yes, there we go. This whole scene lets us know that they do, in fact, have a history. They're comfortable with each other. Asuka here is acting like a kid with him, right? Not putting on the presentation she was for the boys her age. There's a comfort level here that mirrors a little bit of Misato and Shinji's comfort with each other. But Kaji's, giving her the 411 on how it really is with Shinji. It's not just reputation. He's got the numbers to back it up. And because of that, she immediately seeks him out, and she needs to compete more directly. She needs some proof. And she's going to get it. But she's definitely just showing off. It's funny, in her case, her personal little foible here with needing to be competitive, feeling jealous immediately, spurs her to action. Whereas earlier in the series, especially, Shinji's maybe personal tics spur him to inaction, to freeze, to make no decision. So it's another way in which they are very different. She does not go along with the plan. This is obviously a very clandestine, let me go show you my robot. And then she has this whole thing where she kind of belittles the other Evangelions. Says that hers was the first real one, that the others were a prototype and a test type, which is true. That is what they were designated. And that hers is the first real Evangelion. And again, standing up on high, looking down, this is the way she wants to be. This is where, as far as we can tell right now, this is how she gets her self-value. This is where her self-worth comes from. So, his 02 is different. It's interesting that they all have different models. I mean, has a good aesthetic choice anyway. But little things like all having a different number of eyes, right? Zero has the one eye. 2 has 2 eyes and is much more obviously humanoid. And this one has 4 eyes. And so there's no... I don't know what the advantage is exactly. I don't know if there's a functional reason they need eyes in the outside. We saw already that under 01 is an actual head or being filling most of that, all of it. So maybe each one of them has a different set of eyes. But there's no explanation at this point why they needed to diverge in actual aesthetic, but taking the whole robot pilot link and running with it, it illustrates how very different the three pilots are in personality. And now we meet Asuka. Wow, very different in personality. Shinji and Rei now seem like two birds of a feather by comparison. And so, yeah, it is interesting that the order of which the children were discovered by the Marduk Institute, which is not something I've talked about because it's just thrown out there. It's just one of those things like, well, I should pay attention to this. I don't know when I'll find out that this is relevant, but it's come up a couple times. I should pay attention to it. But there's this Marduk Institute that finds these children somehow. And Rey's the first child, and her Ava is the first one by number, but not number one. Asuka here is the second child found, but pilots the actual third Ava, 02. So those line up at least, but then Shinji's the third pilot piloting the second Ava designated 01. Significance? I don't know. That was a good point, that the three Evangelions' eye number do add up to 7 eyes, which is the symbol of... Oh gosh, can I just transition? Yes. Hold that thought. Those 7 eyes? Yeah. Yeah, but it wasn't like Shinji was a mystery. He's Gendo's child. I can believe them needing to find Asuka, for example. But, was there any question Shinji wasn't going to be brought in? I don't know. The fact they could reach out to him on short notice and know that he'd be able to sync with Ava right away means, or it suggests to me that crazy order is just another deception, right? Oh yeah, so we got some good thoughts in chat. I'll share. Do you think the 4 eyes in the Unit 2 is deliberate, meaning that Asuka is maybe a two-faced kind of person, 2 sets of eyes? Or is it owing to her ethnic tradition, that she's half German, half Japanese, 2 from each? It's like Theta doesn't trust Nerve or something. I think like beginning and ending half the episodes with some back shadow conspiracy stuff is not meant to engender confidence, not in their moral integrity at least. Yeah. Anyway, all that rapid characterization of Asuka is really well done. We get a real sense of her quickly. I think it's part of the reason that she immediately became a fan favorite, is how quickly we're able to understand what makes her tick. The way she is so different from Shinji is almost refreshing in a way, and you can tell that she will be someone who makes things happen. Because when the angel shows up, and Shinji wondering what to do, need to go back to Misato, Asuka... Yeah, no, nah. She knows just what kind of opportunity this is. So, she is such a change from what we've been used to with the pilots, and they do such a great job in this first half, and that's exactly half of the episode right there. Not by time, but the way they've structured it. But we're ready to see what she can do. We're ready to, okay, we buy you. You belong in this universe. You're a kind of a nice change of pace. But we're also kind of here for robots fighting, cosmic horrors. So how about we see some of that too? Um, just an aside, but I love how Misato pulls out her own snark when it comes to trying to advise the admirals struggling to deal with the angels. Just peeks in like, oh, just look and see if you need any help, any assistance. Does anyone want to spot a tea? There's so much personality in this episode. I enjoyed this a lot. So we have another one of those lucky pervert things. We'll skip right past it, but it's important to know that, or important that we draw that connection immediately. That Shinji's difficulties with the awkwardness of adolescent and sexuality that we've had characterized a few times already, and among his classmates with the swimsuit track scene that I referred to. By having Asuka change and him deciding to look in on her, we know that will be a thing down the stretch. We know immediately that this is just a new wrinkle, maybe even an escalation in that uncomfortable but unavoidable part of adolescence and the journey he's going through. But I talked about how competitive she was and how she needed to be over Shinji. And she is determined to show him what she can do. And that means he needs a ringside seat. And that means he needs a plug suit. And the spares she has, of course, are made for her. What that means is that that Shinji has to put on a female, very form-fitting plug suit. And he is immediately self-conscious about how revealing it is and all that. But what it also does is kind of emasculate him to make him dress as a girl. And so I think that is another trying to put herself over him. Yes, pragmatically she wouldn't have a guy's suit in her thing, but it's another situation that puts Shinji out of confidence, out of his confidence comfort zone. Is the word I'm looking for. Sorry, I can't concentrate on my. You can tell why I have to break these sessions up. It's like it's humorous in a way, but it also meets her goal of putting herself above and putting him out of sorts. And I don't know. Now, despite all her bravado, she has this moment where she is talking to herself, trying to, get her own game face on. She knows this is this is put up or shut up time, right? She's talked a good fight, and now it's time to see what she's got. And luckily for everyone, she's got it. All her bravado wasn't for nothing. This right here is just what she wants, where she's the one in control and confident, and Shinji is being knocked down a peg, right? There's this little bit we went over at the apparently bad German. It's a nice little world-building detail that these things link to the way you think. She wants him to think in German, and so cuts back to, all right, fine, let's think in Japanese. That's a nice way of changing the language back to the intended audience's language without just having her speak Japanese for no reason. So But so if I can find where it begins here. I'm sorry for the constant hunting. I do like how as soon as Misato finds out that Asuka is powering things up, she is thrilled with the development. She knows it's Asuka immediately. She knows it's not Shinji, and she's rooting for her, and she's going to fight for the microphone here in a second and take it away and try to coordinate with her. So you have that immediate take action. There's a problem. There's a potential solution. Let me get in there and fix it that Asuka is doing here. Now, she might be doing it for a different reason than Misato, but it's something we've seen Misato do a couple of times. And so we're meant to draw a parallel between the two of them in this way. The first of many parallels. Not the first, actually. The dress wearing is a pretty obvious one, too. We we are meant to know that the two of them are same this way, in contrast to the way Shinji and Rei are. And so, anyway, we have this great sequence, if I can find the beginning of it, with the kind of pageantry of the way they erupt up out of the jump off of things. It's really it's just an iconic scene. Where you jump just out of the way. She knows you got 558 seconds, or the whole minute, and she's got to put stuff in. She got to pull it off in that amount of time, and she knows she can't get in the water. So these are the constraints. Can you come up with a solution under fire? And yes, is the answer. All her talk wasn't talk. So we have this great little scene where it lands in such a pose, right? That's like a dance position. I did not take ballet, so I don't know what that's called. But that's a very dramatic. There's a lot of pageantry and drama to the way this is. Even it's wearing a cape. But you can't quite still see the whole thing. Even that wasn't quite its triumphant reveal, right? And then the goal, to get across there, find it, to avoid the angel, and get the backup power supply in time. Can she do it? And yeah, Misato now is in control. You got two people who like to grab the bull by the horns working together. That's kind of an exciting escalation for the series. So then you get to see exactly what Asuka's made of. As she goes along, she'll actually reveal, toss the cape off in dramatic fashion. It's just, man, what an introduction, right? And then she makes it. She gets there, she hooks it in. We already talked about that. Now we can actually address the real problem. So that's our first taste of Asuka in battle, in combat, and she put up, right? Her confidence, overconfidence, her emphasis on her own capability as part of her self-worth makes her capable, I think, of even doing this, of even going in and knowing it's going to work, or just acting like that at the least. In a way, her confidence is why this works, right? Even if her confidence comes from insecurity or jealousy, it's hard to tell at this point. She's a teenage girl, so we have a low threshold for what we expect from self-confidence. But it works because she thinks it's going to work. She knows it's going to work. She knows she can do it, and she does. Now, this is not going to make her easier to deal with, probably. But even here, they got no weapons. She's like, I just need the progressive knife, whatever it is they're shortening for. And Masato echoes her confidence. Everybody else is kind of watching it, different expressions, worried. Obviously, Kensuke is filming the whole thing. Misato is obviously pleased and confident in her decisions. And, yeah, it's such a funny little tool. It actually makes sense with the way the things work, but it's like giant robots, itty bitty carving knife. And then the Eva gets, the action. Obvious marine form. That's a oh lord, he coming. That's an enormous Eva, and that's appropriate, I think, to an aquatic shape where things get much bigger in the water because they can support their own weight because of the water. And we've gone back to a very biological design. And so we now have to wonder, if the angels really are changing what they are each time to suit the objective that day, mission, whatever you want to think of these as. Because this guy wasn't meant to attack NearlyOnRed headquarters, right? Like, this is clearly meant to intercept them out here at the water. From inception, it was. But why? Something we just talked about earlier is that the one thing we seem to know about the angels is that they need to get to whatever it is down there in NearlyOnRed headquarters. Why then be out here? Why... why the break in the pattern? Why get us used to this pattern, introduce us to this pattern, and then now we get this answered for us, so I'm not actually asking you, I'm sorry. But the fact that it's a break in the pattern should make us question it. And as it looked around earlier when it was destroying the ships, Misato does infer that it seems to be looking for something. But the question is, what's it looking for? Like, that's like the background thing, the question they introduced that we don't get to an answer for. And it casts doubt on our assumption that whatever it was they're after is in NearlyOnRed headquarters, because this is obviously very far from NearlyOnRed headquarters. So, oh god, how did I know someone was gonna clip that? We are given the option, like they put the idea in our head that it's after 02, or Unit 2. I don't know why I insist on pronouncing the 0. That is the answer they give to us to satisfy that hey, maybe it's here for the Evangelion. But we should remember that that doesn't actually seem to be what they're after. That the Evangelions are just a barrier between them and whatever's in NearlyOnRed HQ, just like all the armor plating. And so, to have it out here, and while they're giving us that answer, it doesn't ring true, right? But I think in this situation, it suggests that this is one more thing Misato doesn't know, something that Asuka doesn't know, something Shinji doesn't know, which is, what is it the angels are actually after, right? Yeah. It's a question they pose and intentionally give us the wrong answer. And if we are just going along with not just what the characters believe, but what the showrunners are trying to put in our head, we're going to be led astray. Now, luckily, they don't let us stay a mystery. They actually answer this one at the end of this episode. It's something else that has in common with last episode, where there was that clandestine conversation. And I think actually one of those conversations, or part of that conversation, is referencing what happens this time. But they actually solve what it is by the end. We see that it was the setup to get Jet Alone destroyed. This time, at the end of this, we'll actually see what it was the angel was after. So they're setting these little mysteries up, leading us the wrong way, and then solving it for us, answering the question for us. And so we, as an audience, should start to feel like we have a little bit of an unreliable narrator. Not that we have a narrator, but the actual showrunners, the actual director and writer, are intentionally wanting to set us up to come to the wrong conclusions, right? Yeah, anyway, I just want to point that out. I forgot to talk about it earlier, because I can't go specifically to the clips I want, because I'm trying to find every technical difficulty there is. When it dives down, let me put this on here for you. When it actually dives down, and is running around the bottom after they're captured, or after they get taken inside of it. You see them go through not an ocean floor, but a basically abandoned city. Sorry, there was a better shot and I skipped past it. There we go. Reminding us, again, what happened to the world, what the past was like. This isn't necessary. We know they're underwater. It could be coral, it could just be sand down here. But they take this opportunity to remind us of the world that was. And the fact that the ocean is deep enough over what was a city to accommodate this entire carrier group. Those things don't have a shallow draft, right? I mean, not like tankers, but I'm getting distracted. But this is a deliberate choice to make sure we remember, because the fact that it's city ruins down there have no effect on the plot. Why doesn't Evangelion can't move underwater? We don't know that yet. Other than the reference to the type of equipment they have, B-type or whatever. We saw the F-type last time, which was necessary for him to airdrop. And I don't know if it's as simple as F stands for flying. I don't know. We aren't told that, but it may be just a design choice in the sense that it makes the Evangelions function a lot more like humans than like robots, right? That maybe they need to breathe, or they need some access to the air. It would certainly reinforce the fact that these are biological creatures and are therefore have some niche that they are better adapted for over others, right? But it's not something they stop the show to explain. It's enough to know that you're not going to be able to work underwater like this. I think that's enough. That's enough to set the stakes for the battle, to give it some interest, because there's only so much they have to do, which means Misato, once again, has to scramble for an answer and try to save the day. Now, there is a moment, a final bit of characterization here, where I'll show it for you, where Kensuke gets all excited about the new aircraft showing up, and Kaji's in it, and since we're in the middle of the battle at this point, Misato has this moment where she thinks he's got a plan. He's coming to the rescue. And despite how she was treating him earlier, we actually see this is delight at this moment. It's like, she's very pleased that he's showing up at this situation, right? And, yeah, he's got a plan. You ain't in it. And so he pieces out, and the number of reaction shots just in this one episode. Anyway, I just wanted to do an aside on that real quick, and just that little lowering of her hostility, though, when she thinks he's coming to the day, is the first little hint we get that, despite how acrimonious their relationship seems to be from her point of view, in that moment where she forgets she's supposed to be mad at him, she's pretty delighted to see him. And so it's obviously more complicated than that interaction we saw at the table. So, anyway, no help from him. Doesn't matter. Misato is capable, and we get another example here. But what does also happen in this scene, not this scene, but after they're swallowed, is that Shinji reaches in and takes the controls. That Shinji stops being the passenger in this relationship. Not that it's a relationship yet, but you know what I'm saying. He quite literally takes the wheel. It's not a wheel. Not literally. You know what I mean? And now she's actually suddenly conscious about the fact that they are, really close in this little cockpit together. This is a kind of an intimate situation. She didn't care so much when she was bringing him in there to show off, right? When she was changing nearby and putting him in that. But when he actually gets in there and takes control and is in her space, suddenly it's actually a point of contention. Suddenly it's actually that is the thing she's worried about. That is the thing that is bothering her in that moment, not the peril they're in. Again, the minor crises blotting out the huge crises because it's relevant to that character in that moment. Is something that not even Asuka is immune to, right? So, what ends up happening though, despite giving us this display of just how competent Asuka was and the hopscotch and getting things connected and trying to deal with the angel, is when they're underwater, when things are actually not going to plan, when her confidence isn't enough to carry the day, Shinji pitches in. And she doesn't like it, right? But the fact that he can get in there, the fact that he's in there and is not disrupting it at all is interesting. In fact, later on, Ritsuko will be looking at that data and says, no, this is very valuable data. Or, I'm paraphrasing. But the fact that he can get there in sync and the fact that the two of them can work together in there, I'm sure is actually meant to be. Her little statement tells us that that's not, it was not expected outcome. And her interest in it suggests that it might be part of the shape of things to come. Okay? But what it does as far as her characters is that it takes a little bit of this, it knocks Asuka back down a peg, right? She's still very aware, even more than Shinji, of the fact that they're boy-girl in this close proximity. I'll show you. And that's not... Shinji, for a change, is the one who's calm and in control. Now, Asuka's not used to things not going to code, but that's basically, Shinji's every day at this point. So he's actually becomes the one who carries the day here. Yes, it's a team effort, but he's the one that brings her attention back to it. Does not back off when she tries to when she tries to get him to let go of the controls of her Eva, which, by all rights, he should, right? Yeah, you're right. Asuka is still on top here. But experience wins out here. He's been knocked down and gets back up in the past. This is not now unexplored territory for him like it was at the beginning of the series. Whereas for all her confidence and in all her excellent handling of her Eva when she is in control of the situation, and she really is, when it doesn't go to code, Shinji is now the one. Now the ball's in Shinji's court. Sorry, I've reached the coughing fit phase of my throat going out. But we're almost to the end here. Really, the only thing I wanted to show you for sure, and I won't make you watch me clip hunt here, but is... Yeah, here we go. One more example of how carefully they arranged the plan to set up for a nice cinematic sequence, a great shot. So you've got 02 in the belly of the beast struggling to get the mouth open. As we know that the battleships are bearing down and that the window to actually pull this harebrained scheme is closing, the two of them work together. They force open the mouth, eyes light up. Hang on, let me just back up to that shot, right? Man, that's just... what great composition that is. Just in time as they fire in and do their thing. I mean, it's a... And then, yeah. I don't know. I feel like that's one of the things I remember from watching the show the very first time that stuck out in my mind. I'm like, wow, it's a great. This whole episode has those great action shots. A lot of episodes have the great composition of putting symbolic elements and using light and dark, using colors that don't actually make sense in reality but invoke a certain mood. But this episode's full of just great action shots. I They definitely planned to make this a little bit of a spectacle. They definitely wanted people to be impressed by what they pulled off. And so, trying to think what else there is in this one besides the very end. I already mentioned Ritsuko going over the plans, and then there is this little bit where Shinji's unfortunate non-consensual crossplay here becomes immortalized on videotape. So him reporting the things the whole time ends up being useful for one last joke. And they even point out that it's matching outfits, and like the two of them do have similarities, not just in the way they're dressed, but we always got to read into anything character points out that's obvious. At least in a show like this. Now, what Asuka wants to know is where is Kaji, where he's run off to. So once again, we know that he is kind of her, who she's comfortable with. Again, like the Shinji Misato relationship that we have seen develop from scratch. So, yeah. I mean, this episode establishes so many things. There's so many things we now understand about these characters, and a little bit about Nerve, especially this little bit at the end I'll cue up. And helps let us... We get the sense that this is just a beginning of a new chapter. That this is, unlike last episode that was self-contained, this is definitely like things will now be different. And again, it's because of the key of ending with a little transfer student scene and her introducing herself, just like she did to Shinji on the aircraft carrier. Very similar. I think her pose might even be very similar. But the little bit of mystery and world building is this bit here with Kaji and Gendo. And so I think we understand now, we didn't before, that Kaji is at least one of the people that Gendo is occasionally having these clandestine conversations with. And so he now gives us the actual answer to the question Misato posed, which is, what is this thing looking for? What is the angel searching for? And he's like, it's because of this, right? And then we get to this look inside. What could be in this tiny little thing? And find it's reconstituted, that it is sealed like we saw the Berserk Unit 0 was, but it's alive without a doubt. And then we get our little look at this thing. The key to the human instrumentality project. So that thing that was mentioned way back in episode 2, we haven't heard much else about, is apparently important enough that the angels may actually be after that. Not anything in Nerve. Or maybe they're after both. And we just don't know that yet. The question becomes, where did this come from? That the angels couldn't get to it before it was on a ship. But the kind of embryo-like impression this thing gives us, it's not exactly body horror. That's not the right term here. But there's a little bit of, I think there's an intentional discomfiting us at looking at something in its seemingly embryonic state, giant eye. It's a little bit of a violation, almost, to see something like this outside of the womb, right? And it doesn't look quite like a human embryo, but it looks close enough to But yeah, there we go. That's a better shot. The spines, of course, and all that. But the way is, the way it's curled up and all that, that eye is very human eye, even though the rest of its form is not very human. But yes, you're right. Gendo will go ahead and call this thing Adam. Whoops, right past it. Now, we've had the religious iconography a few times, and maybe it's just for symbolism, maybe it doesn't matter, but at this point we get a pretty clear reference to a thing that exists in the universe. That is to say, something that's not just a symbolic or a metaphoric affectation. This is the actual name of an actual thing. And so now we can't ignore all of that religious symbolism, right? Now it's no longer something that we can just think about that, yeah, he's probably trying to be symbolic or adding mystery or cobbling things together.